So welcome to part 2, Fiona, and we're continuing with the shading in different ways, and this is going to be the manual method. So we can use the automatic method when we have 2 colours when we're using Digitizer 5, but 3 colours or more, or if you want to do a manual 2 colour, then this is one of the ways in which you can actually do that. So we have our digitized object, and this is something that you're best working out as a sample, because obviously you can then path your different colours. If you're doing, say, a collection of apples along the way, you'll do a number of colours, path it, and each layer will go down as a separate pathing route. But you do your basic sampling at the beginning, and it just makes life go a little bit smoother so that you can sort out your stitch lengths and your densities. You can even test stitch it and make sure that it's okay and looks alright, because sometimes it can look great on the screen. It can look a little bit patchy or a little bit clumpy sometimes when it's actually stitched out, and this allows you to fine-tune some of that. So we start off with our object, and it's very straightforward indeed. It's just an ordinary object with a fill. On my machine, 0.45 density or spacing with a stitch length of 4 and an edge run underlay of 2.5 and a tatami second run underlay with a stitch length of 3.5 and 2.5 millimeters stitch spacing or stitch density. Now, at the moment, that object is 2,195 stitches. Now, when we are talking about doing this layering, and let's say I want to do 3 colours, I'm really only interested in that top layer. And there's no point in replicating the same number of stitches and piling them on top, because I'll end up with armour plating at that rate. I need to get it down to the density that my machine seems to work well at, which is that 0.45. So how do I get this object and work out how many stitches does that need? So the first thing I need to do is dispense on my sample with the underlay. That's now taking it down to 1,772. I'm going to use 3 colours, and I want them to be distributed evenly across all those 3 colours, so I have to divide that by 3 to work out how many stitches that I want in each layer. So 3's into 1,772 comes back at 557. So you make a note of that, and now what we need to do is look at the properties on this and see what stitch spacing or stitch density here will give us a stitch number of 557. So let's start off at something like 1.3 and see how close that gets us. Now, you do have to watch that when you put that number in and press enter, the program always pops up this travel on edge, and you have to knock it off because it does make a difference. So at 1.3 we get 636 stitches, which is more than I want really. I'm not that keen, so I'm going to go and I'm actually going to take it up a little bit, and 1.35, let's try that, enter, and just watch, there we go, travel on edge, it's back again. Such a scally. 611, still a bit too much. Let me go to 1.4, see what happens there. 1.45, and let's see what we get. Take off the travel on edge, and let's see, 565, and that's, let's try 1.5, see what happens there. Travel on edge, now take it back off, and now look, 551. That's pretty much spot on. So I know that I need 3 layers at 551 stitches per layer. Now, I actually also would like to put an effect on this one, so that will be my base layer, and if I'm going to do any effects, it's probably simplest and quickest to do those effects at this stage. So I'm going to put a Florentine on it. 553 stitches, it's not affecting it much. So press H for reshape. Keyboard, if you don't like to use the keyboard, then press the reshape button up here. Now let's get the angle that I want for this. I want it here, like that, not too sharp. I only want a minimal bit of a curve on there, and I'm quite happy with that. Just come up a little clearer. Yep, start point here, finish point here, and I'm going to actually repeat that on the next one. So I'm going to do Control D to give myself a copy and duplicate it, and immediately you can see there's little line jumps here because I started here, finished here, and this one is going to try and do the same. So press H on the keyboard and bring up your Reshape menu, and I'm just going to switch them over for no other reason that when I'm actually stitching out the sample, my machine's not hopping backwards and forwards. It's the flow. Give the machine as little work to do as possible in some ways. So that's 2, and I now need to decide what colour I actually want that to be. So let's pick something that's a little bit darker. That one can be a cerise pink. This one can be an orange. Now this one I need to duplicate again because that's Control D, and let's change the colour of that one to, let's make it the bright turquoise. Let's see what combination that comes up as, and that's where they are all placed on top of each other. 545, 545, 541, 545. Pretty close, not bad at all. Now just zoom in a little bit. Let's just take it up to 200, possibly a bit more, and let's just nudge this one 1, 2, 3 up. This one 1, 2, 3 down. Just fill in the gaps and hit True View, and we've sort of got some blending here, and that's quite nice. Now what you have to remember is there are no more stitches in that top cover than there were originally, and the original one also has an underlay. So if I want to put an underlay on there, and it's probably a good idea that I do, I put it under the base. So I do all my colours first, I do my shading, I put my effects on, all those bits and pieces, and then I go back and I can put on my underlay of my edge run, and if you remember it was 2.5 for the edge run, and underlay 2 was tatami of 3.5 and 2.5. So this one now goes up to 976 because it's got the 2 pieces that are in there. Now there's nothing stopping me leaving that base where it is, and let's say I can add some other effects to it. Let's say I want that one at profile 1 and I want this one at profile 2. And there we go. I can go back if I want with the fact that it's got the profiles on it, and I can align them, align centers, align centers, full stop, and it creates that nice little rainbow effect. Now you don't have to put the underlay under there, but it is advisable. And so if I was going to do it for 4 colours, it would be the 1772 stitches divided by 4, or I could do it on the 2. You then stitch it out, your sample, and you check that it's actually coming out how you want it to. And that's exactly how I did this. I actually divided it into 3, and I put that on profile 1, this one on profile 2, and then this one I actually switched because I wanted to try and create that intensity here. And that one, if you actually look at it, it's got a radial fill, and I altered the density setting on this one to a spacing of 2 and a stitch length of 4 because I didn't want to have too much of a pile up here. I just wanted, when it was under the apple, for each of them to have that little bit of an intensity when you step back and you look away. And in fact, when you look at the stitch out, which the brown hasn't shown up very well with this flash that keeps washing it out, but you can see how fine that fabric is. It's a fine tight weave, There's no gapping, there's no problems here. And that's one of the ways in which you can actually do that graduated shading, and you can do it manually. Worth playing with, nice little tool to do it. You just have to remember to do your sums. So divide by 2 if you're using 2 colours, divide by 3 if you're using 3 colours, but you're only working with the number of stitches in the top layer. Now there were a couple of points that I said that I wanted to mention for you on here, and they're just something a little bit to have a think about. And that is, let's have a look at some of your stitch angles here. For example, on this one, when I actually look at where your stitch angles are on that, press H, and you've got a stitch angle going this way and a stitch angle going that way. I suspect it's because you wanted to try and create an effect going round vertically, and this one, of course, you've got all those stitches in there. Have a think about some of these stitch angles. I think it was a good idea to have them vertically, but sometimes the luster of the thread itself gives you that effect. It doesn't show up too well in photographs. It does show a little bit in yours. Yours has gone horizontal on this one, but when you look at it here, you can see there is a distinct difference, and it gives a texture and a lift to your fabric. So that's one of the things to have a think about. And there's something that you can have a think about with the stitch angles. For example, on these panels here, ordinarily you'd possibly be thinking in lines of, in the same way that you chevron things on leaves, come in one angle, down, up, down, or just try and get some differentiation in terms of the angles, which is what you've tried to do there. Or another way of doing it is a little trick, for example, that I tried on the one that I did. I don't know if you can see it particularly well here, but in reality this is all in one section, and there's a Florentine on it which gives it a slight curve so that you get this continuous line going all the way around of the angles. And then I've put carved lines in. I don't know if you can see them that clearly, perhaps you can see them better in true view. You see the grey lines here? Those are the carving lines that I've digitized in, and it's such a useful tool. Again, use it carefully, use it sparingly. It's not better, not worse. Panels works just as well, but sometimes it can just give a smooth finish, an alternative. Anyway, Fiona, thanks for doing the challenge. I think that from what I've picked up from your analysis of your stitch out, I think that you've made quite a bit of progress with it, and quite honestly I think that had you pursued it, you would actually have come up with the answers yourself as to what had happened. It isn't always the digitizing. Sometimes it is, but it isn't always. Sometimes it can be the fabric, and we just have to find the ways to manage out those particular issues. So I do hope that you revisit the design and that you tidy up one or two of those things, like for example that underlay, and have a go at doing some of those shadings and see which ones you like and the effects. Have a little bit of a play. So enjoy, and thank you very much for joining in.